he actually said that a call came in and they said the guy's amplifying, and the officer calls over the radio and says, "No, I'm looking right at him. He is not amplifying. They're hearing him 3 buildings away. He must be amplifying." No, he's not. So let me give you this as an introduction. Justin and I coming back from the airport this Thursday night. I took a phone call of someone who how many of you have seen the movie American Gospel? Okay, good. Justin raises his hand. Justin saw it from the other side of the camera. I got to see it from the other side of Justin from the camera because I was there when we filmed it. But we have a woman who was in Bethel Church and went to their school of supernatural. I forget the full name. School.
Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry.
Ministry, yeah. And so she actually was in there and watched that, and she was going to refute it. And she had her notes, and she's taking notes, and she eventually got to the point she put her notes down, just watched it, and realized everything was right. And so the driving down, we got to talk to this 18-year-old woman who really is sounding very, very solid in the scriptures, having been saved 3 years and much of it in false teaching. And in the last 3 months has just been gathering as much as she can from Justin, from John MacArthur, from others, and is sounding really solid now coming out of the NAR. And that's a big part of what Justin's ministry is. But you won't hear him talk about it here because we don't let him. And the reason being is he's one of the better exegetes of Scripture, and I never want him speaking on NAR and stuff because he handles the word so well, and people don't know that. So I want you to be able to sit under his teaching and hear how he exegetes Scripture. He is a great brother. Those of you who've gotten to know him this week, that's why we like to do these smaller conferences. You get the time to sit and talk. And so I'll give the rest of the time to you.
I can have a sense of hope within me that can fuel joy. Because without that, I only have this world to hold on to. So what's the creation that Paul's talking about? I think we know that the creation is from Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we see God bring forth all creation. And now we see in this verse that but generally speaking, we all struggle with that on some level. No matter how great your faith is and your assurance that God provides, there's just that little bit of anxiety that sits in our heart. Am I going to have enough for retirement? Well, what's going to happen in the future? And we all struggle with that. And then there's a small percentage of the wealthy, and they got a whole other set of problems of managing what they have. And I've talked to them as well.
The fact of the matter is, the Bible only gives one reason for divorce, and that is sexual infidelity on the part of the other partner, the other spouse in a marriage. I would never counsel a woman to live under the same roof with a man who is abusing her physically. I think she is under no obligation to stay in a physically abusive situation. She can move and live somewhere else without divorcing. Chances are the husband will probably divorce her when she does that. But emotionally abusive is not a reason for divorce. Get her in touch, put her in contact with some godly ladies in the church that can support her and encourage her, and she has to persevere. Of course, I guess what exactly is meant by emotional abuse? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a broad. It would depend on the severity of it, but it's not a reason for divorce. But she would have, as best she can, she would encourage her to be willing to forgive her husband if he repents. If he does not, she has to remain in the marriage covenant. But I guess the severity of the abuse and the kind of abuse you're talking about would determine whether or not she should stay in the same roof, under the same roof. So I guess it would depend on how severe it is.
I'm more strict in my view of divorce. I think that the case with Jesus says, I think the Greek text says, even in the case of sexual adultery. So I'm even more strict in it. However, Paul gives the out if the unbelieving spouse abandons that route. But it's the question is emotional abuse. I would argue they don't have to stay in it emotionally or physically in the house. And this, of course, if they're believers, and we're talking church discipline. Church discipline is one of the ways in which the church cleans up its house. In that, and follow the Matthew 18 principle. If she goes to the pastor, there's a question in the back there as a follow-up, I guess.
That was my question. Actually, there's a particular individual that I'm trying to counsel, and her husband has taken her out of a church that they were in that could be exercised, and they go to Times Square Church, and it's over an hour and a half away from their home.
Let me think about that for a second. For 10 minutes. I have been on both sides of the table. I've been in the secular field. I have been in the current program I'm in now that's a blended program, and I have been in the biblical counseling realm. The biblical counseling was a backlash against Christian psychology. Now the blended movement is a backlash against the biblical counseling. So it is swinging back and forth. My biggest fear is that Christian counselors are buying into secular models, and I see that. But I really say I've seen that a whole lot. The problem is that a lot of the biblical counseling programs don't address the psychological models correctly. And what I mean by that, there is some truth in the secular counseling models, but Satan had some truth too. Right. So my leaning today is that Christian counseling has to deal with the secular model, because most people that go look for a counselor, there's no biblical counselors in their community. In the community I'm in, it's about 18,000 people. There is one Christian counseling center that I would not even be a part of. They asked me, I was like, no. It would have been like that light in the Catholic world. I was like, no. The head of the counseling program, the Reverend, she mentioned that we weren't there to proselytize. And so as soon as she said that, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be part of this. So there are some secular counselors that I would recommend over them. I don't have time. I don't spend a whole lot of time doing it. But in communities that are much larger, I would seek a strong biblical counselor. The problem is that there's very few. Pastors, they don't want to counsel. That's just the plain truth of it. Most pastors don't have time to counsel. They don't want to do it. There's a lot of topics that come up they don't want to deal with. And a lot of the parishioners, they don't want the pastor looking at them funny on Sunday morning after they come and confess something to them. So that's kind of how I feel about the state. There does need to be some churches that step up and create a biblical counseling program within their church. And so that's kind of my take on it. Justin, what do you have in your community, your church?
He is the way, the truth, and the life. Seek Him as He is seeking you.
Meditate, meditate, meditate.